Hello, everyone. Welcome into the Athletic Fantasy Football Podcast, Thursday, July 15th. Michael Beller, Brandon Funston, and Jake Seeley here with you on this fine Thursday. We're going to have a little bit more fun with fantasy football ADPs. Jake and I did this earlier in the week. Brandon was on vacation. He is now back with us. He couldn't miss out on all the ADP fun. I assume that's why you're back, right, Funston? You just couldn't let us have two ADP shows without you, could you?
I was hard to contain myself at the beach with beer in hand, but I was like, oh, I know they're talking ADPs. I got to get back. So here I am, very excited about this.
We've got Jake messing with his monitor here. It's just,
monitor's falling over.
Pets' heads are falling off. It's all over the place.
Thank you. I almost said that.
This episode of the Athletic Fantasy Football Podcast. If you were with us earlier in the week, you know Jake and I went through players in about the top 60. So we're going to pick up there. And basically, we've got players all the way out to like ADP 170, 180. We're just going to see sort of how many we get through in 40 or 45 minutes starting at the top there. And again, this is Draft Kit launch week here at The Athletic, so be sure to check out everything that we've got going on. Jake has an awesome customizable cheat sheet to go along with his rankings. If you think, Jake, you're an idiot, Latavius Murray is going to get 50 more carries than you say he's going to get, you can throw it in there and see what it does to the projections, to the rankings for yourself and all that good stuff. We've got a ton of content up for you to read right now, and that's just going to keep on rolling all the way up until we get to the start of the season. We also, of course, have a Guess That Player, and that's where we start this episode of the Athletic Fantasy Football Podcast. This is a fun one, guys. I'm excited to talk about this one. I feel like I say that every week, but this one really is a fun one. Here is our first clue for Guess That Player. I was wide receiver 16 by points per game. This is half PPR scoring a year ago, 16 spots better than my overall finish. So maybe this guy was pretty good, but had some injuries that he dealt with a season ago. Wide receiver 16 by points per game, wide receiver 32 overall. And yeah, feel free, if and when you think you know it, as Jake's doing, write it down.
This should have been tight end who was I never told anybody you're mispronouncing my name for my entire career, Mr. Travis Kelce. Like, how do you not tell people forever? But yes, you missed that? You missed that video yesterday? I just saw your face. I thought we got to bring that up right off the show. By the way, everybody out there, Travis Kelce is how you pronounce his last name.
Did his brother?
I will tell you right now, I am not
correct.
He's missed on the statute of limitations. It's too late.
Yeah, right.
I am Kelsey for life. So sorry, Travis Kelce.
Yeah, have we heard from brother Jason about this? Is he saying, yeah, that's our name?
I mean, it doesn't matter what his brother says. Like, he was on a video, and I forget what show he was on. And he goes, I get Kelsey all the time. It's Kelce, but I never corrected anybody. And Patrick Mahomes was like, hey, you learn something new every day. He's actually the one that I think made the tweet blow up.
Yeah, that is wow. There's a 0% chance that people will start calling him Kelce, right? It's just not going to happen.
I mean, is this like the T-Rod or whatever that was? Remember when Tyrod Taylor Tyrod? Yeah, Tyrod. That's what it was.
Tyrod Taylor. Yeah, that one has a better chance. I mean, Travis Kelce's a superstar. We've been calling him Kelce for years and saying his name over and over and over.
That's why I can already remember Kelce because it is Travis Kelce. I'll say it the entire time.
Hey, fun fact for the Beller family, the Kelce brothers went to the same high school as my dad, Cleveland Heights High School, in outside of Cleveland. So how about that?
By the way, my last name is actually pronounced Brown, just in case you're wondering.
All right, let's get into our fun with ADP here. Hey, maybe this guy we're going to be talking about as a Travis Kelce type eventually in his career. It's Kyle Pitts. Kyle Pitts flying up draft board. 68.7 is his combined ADP. We are looking again at Yahoo, Fantrax, and FFC. We've got him at 68.7. That makes him the tight end 6, a mid-6th round pick in 12-team leagues. And it does feel like the last guy at this position, right? If you want to get a big-time tight end, Kyle Pitts is probably the last chance you'll have, or maybe he'll eventually bump up and, I don't know, Mark Andrews or TJ Hawkinson will be the last chance you have, but he's in the group of the last guys you'll have to get at this position. Jake, at 68.7, at tight end 6, pass, take, where are you at on Kyle Pitts?
Since the draft, I've been take at tight end number 4, and I'll continue to be number 4. I know a lot of people are on Hawkinson, and if you want to take Hawkinson 4, and Pitts 5. I don't have a problem with that. I understand the volume for Hawkinson should essentially be higher, like a target share market, that type of situation. He should potentially be the Kels for the Lions. But the problem is, Jared Goff versus Matt Ryan, offense versus offense. You go to the projections and you can change this. You can change the number of plays for a team. You can change how much the team passes. I think we all expect the Atlanta Falcons offense to not only play more, but to pass more. And it's Matt Ryan versus Jared Goff, and it's Kyle Pitts versus TJ Hawkinson. So just a lot of factors going in there. And then you can look at the Lions on the flip side of it and say that, he should be Hawkinson should be the number one, but can he handle being the number one? Because what is Tyrell Williams going to take away from defenses? What is Brashard Perriman? You take away the deep threat, which should open things up. But I think that if you're saying, how do we stop the Lions passing game? You start with Hawkinson. With the Falcons, you start with Calvin Ridley, which is just going to help Kyle Pitts, who is essentially a wide receiver playing tight end, just dominates. Here's what I keep comparing it to. I know we got hung up on the tight end, and I said this, I think you guys saying the same thing. This isn't your normal tight end situation, but look at the situation Justin Jefferson stepped into last year. It was the number 2 role. It was a ton of volume, a ton of opportunity. That's what Pitts is stepping into. Take the tight end out of the imagination for just a second and picture it as that. That's the opportunity.
Yeah, you said it. He's basically a wide receiver. He's basically the Julio Jones replacement. And there's a reasonable, there's a world where he's the number 3 most targeted tight end behind like Darren Waller and Travis Kelce. And, I think Travis Kelce. And, among tight ends, is he going to be the leader in yards after catch? He's going to be probably right up there. This is just a ridiculous, as we said, he's a wide receiver playing tight end. So he's my number 4 tight end as well. I think, in terms of where he's going in drafts, it all depends, on the context of your draft. I treat the tight end like I treat the quarterback position. I don't want to start the run. I'm not going to be the Travis Kelce guy unless he falls late in the first round. I think it's good value. But, I want to be QB or tight end 5, and I want to be Kyle Pitts, or I want to be tight end 6. It's Kyle Pitts, and that would be a great situation. So whenever that happens for me, I'll take it.
We're going to have to check back in on Pitts about a month from now, because I have a feeling as more and more people start drafting and we're putting to bed some of the earlier data and more just focusing on maybe like today through the end of August, we're going to see that ADP for Kyle Pitts rise. I would be surprised if he weren't the tight end 4 by the time people are really sitting down to draft toward the end of August. For a few of these, we're going to do some special ADP battles. Some guys who are close to each other. We've done this before. We're going to do a few. Let's start with one right now. Javonte Williams and Travis Etienne. Now, this is one that right now you see Javonte Williams as the 71st pick by ADP, RB30. Travis Etienne, 71.7, RB31. I think these guys are going to be close to one another no matter what. I wouldn't be surprised if we were talking about them 10 spots higher, 12 spots higher, something along those lines. Overall, not at the running back position, but overall, something along those lines, again, by the time people are really drafting. But either way, whether we're talking about them as RB30 and 31 or RB23 and 24, I have a feeling they're going to be joined at the hip. So, Javonte Williams, Travis Etienne, Brandon, you can only have one. Who is it and why?
It's slam dunk Javonte Williams for me, because I have a hard time imagining a world where it's Travis Etienne and James Robinson aren't kind of working in some sort of near split in that backfield. And I can imagine a world where Javonte Williams is just taking over that Denver backfield, a la, I bring up a lot, a la, what J.K. Dobbins did in Baltimore, bumping Mark Ingram to the curb there. So I know Gus Edwards is there, so it's not a perfect fit. But there's a world which Javonte Williams is maybe the 65-70% running back in Denver, and it's a good running system there. So for me, it's Javonte.
It's Javonte mostly because at this similar price, if Javonte ends up being the only one of the two, to what you're talking about, Beller, and he's the one that jumps 10 spots, but Etienne stays, I can see myself taking Etienne. We've had this conversation a lot already, and the feeling of Etienne, I think you'll get mid RB2 value. I think you'll get Lester Kamara and a better, Latavius Murray with James Robinson. That's the comparison we keep making. And I do think Javonte Williams is going to be the guy. Melvin Gordon still sitting out as of this point. Well, there's not really much to go off of right now. So we still have the next round of camps and, practices and stuff like that, where we can see if he shows up. And if he doesn't, then still Williams will warranted move up. But I think that Williams takes over. I just don't know if it's going to be week 1. And if Melvin Gordon's still there, I've said this a million times. I think it'll be week 6 or 7, similar to Miles Sanders in his rookie season. Yeah. And at that point, you're talking about top 15 running back potential. But if we're going to start pushing him to RB 20, now you're paying that price to get him where, I mean, that RB 20 is a conceivable outcome, even if he is the guy with Melvin Gordon as the complementary piece instead of a timeshare. So I think we could see the point where Williams gets priced out, where Etienne, I don't think Etienne's really going to rise that much. I think Etienne could stay right in this range.
Yeah, that wouldn't be a surprise, right? Because we know James Robinson's involved. We have all these receivers, and we're going to talk about one of them a little bit later, but DJ Chark and Laviska and Marvin Jones. And so there's a lot of guys competing for touches there, and you know that he's going to have that running back that people like in James Robinson. Guys competing for touches too in Denver, that's no surprise either. And another guy we're going to talk about too, coming from the Broncos, but wouldn't be a huge shock to see Javonte be the big riser out of these two guys. So unanimous, Javonte Williams over Travis Etienne, if that does end up being a draft day decision. How about Juju Smith-Schuster, you guys? I feel like this is going to be another person who people maybe climb up a little bit on, because your memories of him last year are probably a little bit worse than what he actually produced last year. 831 yards. There is no way to paint that as anything but a disappointment out of Juju Smith-Schuster. But he caught 97 passes for 9 touchdowns. He basically was like Jarvis Landry in Miami. Jarvis Landry from the Miami days is basically what you got out of Juju Smith-Schuster a season ago. We know there's a lot of competition for Ben Roethlisberger's attention in Pittsburgh. And if you look at the rest of the Steelers receiving corps, you see Deontay Johnson up at ADP of 58, and you find Chase Claypool at a wide receiver 2774 overall. So we've actually got Juju the lowest of the 3, and that right there has me interested in him, guys. Jake, what are your thoughts on Juju going into this season?
My thoughts as I'm looking at my rankings as I'm changing my answer before you even get the clue number 2. So I did my rankings and my projections this year. So one of the things for everybody that hasn't seen the draft kit yet, go check it out. I get this every single year. Is I rank to my projections, but we talk about on the show. We do this like, well, maybe I have wide receiver 20, but I'm like, you know what? I would take 3 guys behind him. Like if I was drafting, I would take 3 guys, because draft a little bit more for upside, a little bit more of context, a little bit more of breakouts versus situational, that type of stuff. So the funny thing is I included Juju and Deontay, because I have Deontay at 16. I would actually take Julio and Tyler Lockett ahead of him, so he only drops down 2 spots. But Juju's at 27. And I actually have him at 29 because I would take Ayuk and DJ Chark in front of him. Small differences. But I brought that up to also say is I've been one of the most positive people about the Steelers offense. At the same time, we have to acknowledge the risk that's here. Like we're assuming a lot in saying that Ben Roethlisberger should bounce back, not to peak Ben Roethlisberger, but what if he is Drew Brees toast? Like what if there's nothing to bounce back from? Like this is who he is at this point. So there's a lot of assumptions here. And if he is only last year, and if Najee Harris doesn't help the play action, it doesn't help the passing game, doesn't help Juju Smith-Schuster, then just replicating last year's numbers with Chase Claypool a significant factor, especially in the touchdown department, which is a lot to ask Juju to replicate last year's numbers with that touchdown mark. Not saying he can't do better on the receiving end, but that's a high touchdown for what he was doing. I just think you have to bake that in a little bit. So they're not that far under where the projections fall, but I'd still you have to take that with a I think this is a proper spot for Juju. I think that's a fair spot.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty close to this rank. I'm actually a little bit more bullish. I'm wide receiver 26 on him, but you got to remember he's 24 years old. He's had basically an average of 8 touchdowns in the 3 years with Ben Roethlisberger, and I feel like that's enough of a history that you can say he kind of owns that sort of value in the touchdown department. So high volume. I think there's more to, for as much as you can spin the negative sides. I feel like if I'm listening to an argument on why things could be better versus what they were last year and even worse, I'm going to lean a little bit to the better side. It's hard for me to imagine that Najee Harris doesn't help play action. I'm so bullish on Najee Harris. Yep. And Roethlisberger, I don't know that he could be a whole lot worse in terms of how he looked last year. So he's still around. I'm hoping that at least.
Hey, I like the beard. Dad joke.
Quarterbacks and beards, I'm in as well.
He's a year older, I will say that, and that could we saw him really laboring around the field pretty much all year last year. I think that's really the risk is as Jake said, if he's toast, if he is just falling off a cliff, and it's something we've seen before. Saw from Peyton Manning in the middle of a season his last year. If he's fallen off a cliff, I think that's really the risk for this Pittsburgh team. But I like what you said there, Brandon. 8 touchdowns per season with Ben Roethlisberger. It feels like as volatile as receiving touchdowns can be, he at least, I think we have to think about that in our heads, that he sort of owns that share of the passing touchdowns in Pittsburgh until proven otherwise. Next up is Damien Harris, and I'm not sure if there's a running back who is so obviously atop his team's depth chart who is getting less attention than Damien Harris is right now. And I get it. James White's going to own the receiving share. Maybe Ramondre Stevenson gets in there. Sony Michel's still on the roster. Like, there's plenty of things you could pick at with Damien Harris. Maybe this just isn't a very good offense, similar to what it was last season. But still, he's very obviously atop the depth chart. He's running back 34. No one's really fighting you for him, given what his expected volume is. I feel, Brandon, as though there's more to like here than there is to dislike.
I feel like Charlie Brown, who's avoided Lucy in the football for 5 years, and then all of a sudden, you're starting to think, well, maybe I should try to kick the football. And, it is looking like Damien Harris we could finally get like the one guy, as like the main ball carrier. It happened for a while last year, but that was because Sony Michel was hurt. But like, if Michel is fine and Ramondre Stevenson is fine, are we really buying into this is just a Damien Harris show? Between the 20s, between the tackles, and it's just James White in the passing game only. I feel like that's possible, and something has me kind of hesitating to really buy in fully. But I do think at RB34, this is a great value. I have him in my top 30. I'm trying to look really quick where I have him, but let's see. I have him at 30. So I'm a little bit more bullish than the ADP market on him, but I still am kind of just like, all right, I feel like this could be good, but I'm waiting for something to be pulled out from underneath me here.
Yeah. So, I say when you say obvious on top of the depth chart, I would say from a talent perspective, yes. I would say from like obvious as in a guarantee, no, because it's still the Patriots. A couple things I will say here too, as well as though. So James White, I think, is a big factor on who's playing quarterback. But James White, Stevenson, I don't think Sony Michel. In my estimation, looking at this depth chart, I would almost say Sony Michel's gone week 1. That would be my estimation.
I agree. That's why I said he's on the roster right now, but I think he's probably
and I actually brought that up in my projections and ranking. One of the 2 columns, I don't even remember when I said that, this is baking in. I have Damien Harris at RB27, and that's with Sony Michel on the roster. I would love to cut Sony Michel off the roster and give the majority of that work to Damien Harris, which would boost him even higher. And now we're talking about an RB2. The thing about Harris versus Stevenson versus James White is, what do those other 2 guys do? They tell you 9 out of 10 times what the play is going to be. Mm-hmm. Damien Harris is similar to a lot of the running backs from the SEC, where they're better pass catchers than actually the Big Ten too. Like kind of like a Jonathan Taylor. He's a better pass catcher than people realize. No, he's not.
Yes, he is.
Top 10, but he's a good pass catcher. And I think that Damien Harris gives Belichick it gives you that running back that you can keep him out there for all 3 downs. Is he going to be out there 90% of the time? Absolutely not. He's going to be out there 65% of the time. I think that's in the realm of possibilities. And I think that's why I know it, Brandon. We don't want to do this. We're like, oh my God, I've been burned so many times. But this is kind of like the last year's trash too, is sometimes, that's the best values. You find the places you've been burned by players. Well, now you find a backfield that's burned us forever. So maybe this is a supreme value. I think Harris also, I will say, Beller, I've seen a lot of tweeting about him lately. I have a feeling if people are paying attention to the fantasy football community, blah, 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 that in the fantasy football world, the avid players are going to have him higher up your draft boards than your average person who's not even paying attention until August.
Yeah, I mean, Patriots RB1, regardless of who it is, starts out, it seems like, at RB34. And then maybe things change as we get closer to draft season. And I think this is one where people are going to realize Damien Harris seems to be the primary guy, even with James White doing what he might do, even with Ramondre Stevenson having some share of the backfield. Damien Harris is going to be as much the guy as the Patriots typically let a running back be. And so I wouldn't be surprised. You said RB27, Jake. Wouldn't be surprised to see him ultimately play his way up there by time draft season rolls around in a big way. Referenced another Bronco I wanted to talk about, this one who I am very excited about, Courtland Sutton, right now an 88 ADP wide receiver 32. That puts him off the board early, mid-8th round. I love this guy, you guys. And I think the more interesting discussion with Courtland Sutton isn't where he should be going. I think this is probably fair given the depth of the wide receiver position, given the fact that he is coming off a serious injury. Jerry Jeudy's going to have a major role, obviously. Noah Fant doing what he does. But I think the better discussion for Courtland Sutton, and maybe for the entire Denver offense, is would we rather see Teddy Bridgewater as this team's quarterback, or would we rather see Drew Lock as this team's quarterback vis-a-vis Courtland Sutton? Where are you at on that, Jake?
Aaron Rodgers.
That's right. That's true.
Jokes aside, like Courtland Sutton. So, we all know this. Courtland Sutton's coming off an injury, similar to Saquon Barkley, Christian McCaffrey. A lot of these guys, as we can assume, best case scenario, and the injury optimism can sometimes, similar to trying to do the Patriots thing, it can bite you in the ass. You've been burned before, and you don't want to play that. I think that's why you see Sutton here, because whether it's Locke or Bridgewater, Courtland Sutton being Courtland Sutton, this is underpriced. This is vastly underpriced. Courtland Sutton was showing that he could be a true NFL and fantasy wide receiver one. Jerry Jeudy just makes the offense more dangerous, and I think a lot of people are on the Jeudy has a better second season than first season, but it does come back to the quarterback play. I don't know if this is going to be surprising or not. I kind of feel like it is. If I'm going for what I want, like it's kind of the fantasy drafting. Like, do I want to draft for fourth place or do I want to draft for first? I want to draft for first. Right. So if I'm going for best potential ceiling, I want Drew Lock. And Drew Lock has the lowest floor. Drew Lock can bomb and not be in the NFL next year. But we know Teddy. Teddy's the safe option. Teddy's like, all right, I want Courtland Sutton to be wide receiver 25 and just not lose my draft pick. I don't want to play that game. I like Teddy would be great. I wouldn't bomb by drafting Courtland Sutton. But if I'm going for, I want Courtland Sutton to get back to being a wide receiver one because I know he can be, I actually want Drew Lock.
Yeah. I have him ranked. I have Courtland Sutton ranked wide receiver 17. So I think I agree with Jake.
Oh, wow.
Look, he was already a top 20 wide receiver in 2019, and he's coming back from a big injury, but so is Saquon Barkley. And guess what? People are taking Saquon Barkley in the top 5. And there's been more talk about whether Saquon Barkley is going to be good to go to start the season than there has been Courtland Sutton. There's been, by all accounts, he is just looking good and ready to go. I think what we saw from him when he was a top 20 wide receiver is he was doing it with 4 different quarterbacks. It was, 3 different. It was Joe Flacco, Drew Lock, and Brandon Allen. And he put up huge numbers. So even if it's Drew Lock or if it's Teddy Bridgewater, I think it's a step up in terms of what he was dealing with a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, so and I think Jerry Jeudy is a great complement to the style of play that Courtland Sutton is. So I actually think that's an addition for it's a plus for him in Jeudy being there.
Yeah, this is going to be a fun offense. I know we would love to see Aaron Rodgers there. Obviously, that means we would take a big chunk out of Green Bay's offense, another offense we're excited about, at least the guys at the top of it. But no matter who the quarterback is, like you said, Brandon, with Sutton and Jeudy and the running back situation and Fant, this is going to be, I think, a really fun offense to watch. And Courtland Sutton get that rocket ship going because this is going to be a guy who really, really climbs.
Real quick to come back on that, like a fun offense. Yeah, like my only hesitation, and this is baked into the projections, everybody wants to screw around with it. I feel like it's going to be more run heavy and balanced than any other team in the league. Especially also because the defense is arguably top 5 defense. And that's part of my concern is like, even if it's Drew Lock and even if Drew Lock breaks out, I don't even know. I don't think he even passes the ball 600 times. So that's a little bit of my hesitation with the passing game, as much as I do love Sutton and Jeudy, because we also didn't even mention the other name in the factor is Fant. They have 3 great weapons, and they also have KJ Hamler, who should step up and be one of the better slot wide receivers in the league. So that's a little bit of my hesitation in general also.
Yeah, always good to remember. We talk about this every so often on this show, right? We have to always remember how these teams are going to be trying to win in games in real life. And the Broncos trying to keep up with the Chiefs, and obviously that's a quixotic thing for them, but maybe keep up with the Chargers, maybe keep up with what could be a top-heavy AFC wildcard race. Like, if they're going to do it, they're probably going to have to do it on defense. So maybe that does take a little bit of the helium out of what we're expecting from this passing game this season. All right, guys, time for a second clue for Guess That Player. Here it is, clue number 2. This is my 5th year in the league, and despite that, I'm just 25 years old. I turned 25 in the offseason, so this guy is playing this season at 25 years old. It's his 5th year in the NFL, so came in the NFL as a relatively young player out of college. And to remind you what clue number 1 was, wide receiver 16 by points per game, 16 spots better than my overall finish. This 25-year-old should have us pretty excited going into this.
Yeah, I think it is. I think my changed answer is correct.
You think it's changed answer is correct? Brandon, you got any inklings up there?
I do. I'm going to write it down right now.
Yeah, write it down for sure. And while you're writing it down, I will move us on to our next ADP showdown. I need to like Nando to expense me a siren I could do for things like that, because we've got another showdown here. This one coming.
You can download a free app. It's an expensive siren.
I know, but I want the prop here. I want to have a red light going around. I want all that. Obviously, I'm gonna throw the sound in the podcast version of this, of course. But I want the prop. The prop is super fun. Quarterbacks. Let's talk about it. Matthew Stafford, Ryan Tannehill, Joe Burrow. These 3 guys going 1, 2, 3 with one another. Matthew Stafford, 92.7 ADP. Ryan Tannehill, 96.7. Joe Burrow, 98. QBs 11, 12, and 13. In a world where you can only have one of these guys, Brandon, and in a world where you're probably going to be starting one of these guys as your primary starter if you do draft him, which one of them do you want it to be?
I finally have just bought in completely wholesale to Ryan Tannehill's efficiency, understanding that the volume will be lower, and I understand this, but I'm sorry, it's been nearly 2 seasons of top 10 production, and he's gonna be in the best situation he's been in. So I have all these guys really close, but I'm going Tannehill, Stafford, Burrow in that order.
I thought you said buying in. I thought we were going to agree on this one.
Joe Burrow.
I'm going to. Well, I was going to set this up because I'm going to give a call back to my friends Greg Sussman, Frank Stampfel, and Mike Florio, who in fantasy baseball world a couple of years ago used to go draft Joe Musgrove, draft Joe Musgrove. So now it's draft Joe Burrow. Draft Joe Burrow. I have Joe Burrow for the projections leading the league in attempts, and it's 640 and change, which is 640 and change under his pace for 16 games before he got hurt. So you take a 17th game. I mean, honestly, if you told me he passed 680 times, I wouldn't be shocked. He was averaging 40 a game. I wouldn't even say like that's crazy for a lot of quarterbacks, but not Joe Burrow, not this offense, not everything that's out there. And if you look at his pace and his play and everything like that, the one thing that didn't measure up was the touchdowns. I think we could all, but we would say, if you're Matt Ryan, we would say, well, positive touchdown regression is coming, just like negative regression was coming after 2016 when they went ballistic the opposite way. So we would say that about most quarterbacks, and Joe Burrow deserves to be in that conversation, especially with his boy now, Jamar Chase, who is arguably one of the top 5 wide receiver prospects we've seen in years, like all the drafts combined. So you say Chase, Boyd, T. Higgins, who took more step forward as a rookie than I thought he would. Joe Burrow back at quarterback healthy. This offense, it is Joe Burrow. And I don't disagree with you on let's just accept the efficiency of Ryan Tannehill, especially with Julio Jones there. I don't disagree with you at all. But I could see Joe, if you told me out of these 3 quarterbacks who finishes top 5, I would say Joe Burrow. The other 2 don't have a chance. And I like the other 2.
Yeah, I think that's the deal. Right here in this 3, no one has the ceiling the ceiling of Burrow. It's not close. Whereas
so can you do it? Draft Joe Burrow. Draft Joe Burrow.
Joe Burrow.
See, there you go.
I will say, so we've got, starting next week, we will have our usual check-ins with all our beat writers. Every summer, we have these beat writer roundtables on this podcast with all of our beat writers at The Athletic as they are heading into training camp. I'm conducting the interviews right now. I just did the one earlier this week with our Bengals beat writer, Jay Morrison, and he is with you, Jake. He thinks no reason to expect any real downgrade in passing volume for Joe Burrow this season with what that defense, even though there's some improvements on that defense, with what that defense is shaping up to be this year. So Joe Burrow looking like another high volume guy for sure. And really all 3 of these guys, I mean, play super flex. just play Superflex fantasy football because these guys need to be a little bit more important than we're making them in traditional fantasy football. Let's get back to the ADP fun. I'm going to go to a wide receiver who we sort of obliquely referenced a little bit earlier. Laviska Shenault coming off the board at an ADP of 124.7, wide receiver 47, early 11th round. We were all excited about him last year. That Jacksonville offense just flat out wasn't capable of making the most of what Viska brings to the table. I think the offense as built this year with Trevor Lawrence at the helm is a little bit more built to take advantage of what he does, but they're also built to take advantage of what Travis Etienne does. And they're built to take advantage of Marvin Jones and DJ Chark and James Robinson and all these guys. So even though I really want to be excited about Laviska, it's hard for me to get fully on board with what I expect his volume to be. I will say early 11th round, wide receiver 47, totally affordable price. Jake, where do you land on him, especially in the context of what he's competing with on his team?
It's, I've been very much the DJ Chark guy, and even that, I think I mentioned it before, DJ Chark doesn't even check into my top 20, but it's DJ Chark first, it's Marvin Jones second, and then Shenault. The biggest thing here is not even Chark, is that Marvin Jones is here. It's Marvin Jones and John Brown are two of the most overlooked, underrated signings this offseason, and if you told me both finished as number ones on their team, as in even better than DJ Chark, I wouldn't be shocked. And Marvin Jones, for all intents and purposes, has been one of the most underrated fantasy wide receivers for years. He's been that guy. And could he conceivably lead the team in receiving touchdowns? I think that's all it is. It's just, I like Shenault. I love Shenault. I will say this. I was kind of shaking my head. No, as you said, everybody was loving him last year. For fantasy purposes, like as much as I love the talent, I didn't think he would even make the noise he did last year. I'll admit that. Like I was thinking year two, because where is he going to play? Where's the volume going to come from? And he had some rawness to develop. He's extremely dangerous. He has number one NFL wide receiver upside, but I just don't know if he gets there with Chark and with Marvin Jones, unless what we saw from Chark last year was more of Chark falling off and not being able to, similar like Corey Davis, not necessarily being able to be the number one NFL defensive attention. You're just better as a 1B. Maybe that's him. And if he falls off or even gets supplanted and is all of a sudden third in snaps, then Shenault's a boom. And I think at this price, that's kind of baked in right now. So I do have, for all that being said, I have Shenault at 41. So I'm taking him before he gets to 47 because of that upside.
Yeah. I have him at wide receiver 39, but I was going to bring up the fact that,
that's where I have Marvin Jones.
I just echo most everything you said. I'm worried about the volume, and it's interesting. I just think in public leagues, I think they got it more right maybe than we do. And you look at like NFC leagues, he's wide receiver 38. But I don't know if you guys have been noticing, like Scott Fishbowl League, he went wide receiver 31.
He was really early in mine, yeah.
Like I feel like in a lot of expert leagues, quote unquote, there's guys that are going to try to be cool and be the guy that's reaching on Laviska Shenault, and there's always that player, and it just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. You start drafting him in the early 30s, I just don't think there's any path to him delivering a solid return on investment at that side. And all the talent in the world, but this is a situation where it's not looking like huge volume for him.
Yeah, I would say there's a path to a wide receiver 30 season for Viska, but like every single thing needs to go right, starting with the fact that the Jaguars view him as a larger target and touch share guy than we assume they do. I think for him to get to wide receiver 30, he would have to start with a higher baseline than we think he's on right now. And then a bunch of things after that would also have to go right. But I think we're all in agreement that if we can get him at this price, this is definitely an affordable price. And Jacksonville, one of those offenses that you love to invest in, I think. And it's really easy, actually, no one's fighting you for Chark or Viska or Marvin Jones or even Lawrence or really either of the running backs. Like, it's pretty easy to get an avenue of investment. We could say that we want to invest in the Chiefs, but, to invest in the Chiefs, it's going to take a lot to get Travis Kelce. There you go, Jake. Or Tyreek Hill, or Patrick. Like, you're gonna have to spend to do it. The Jaguars, you can find ways to invest in this offense without really spending up to do it, and Viska gives you another route to do that. The Saints are an offense that we have famously loved investing in over the years. A little bit of a different situation this season without Drew Brees, and maybe that makes Latavius Murray a little bit more interesting this year. 129.3 is the ADP on Latavius Murray right now. RB45, Brandon, we know where you're at on Latavius. Take it away.
Yeah, I mean, he's been way better than RB45 each of his last 2 years in New Orleans, and he's kind of been a guy who he's had 140 to 146 carries 3 straight years, basically about the same production. And they're talking that this could be the year because of the changeover at quarterback, that they're going to be more run heavy and leaning more on that backfield. So even if nothing changes and it's just the same old volume that Latavius Murray gets, he is going to return better than the RB45 value. He's done it. He's been borderline top 30. I think he was 29 a couple of years ago and like 31 or 32 last year in half PPR leagues. And I just think that there is a reasonable potential that he's getting up over, 160 carries this year and having one of his bigger workloads he's seen in a long time. But look at Gus. Everybody's in on Gus Edwards. And I think that Latavius Murray is a better version of Gus Edwards, and he's going behind Gus Edwards in drafts. So I think this is a fantastic deal if you get him at RB45 in your draft.
45, fantastic. Like, so where do you have him?
Okay, I'll tell you.
No,
all right. Let me look it up.
I'm not trying to challenge you. I'm 100% curious because I'm at 42, so I think that's proper value.
I have him at 39.
Okay, so a little bit more aggressive. My Latavius Murray feeling is always the same. I understand the appeal. The appeal, though, is if Alvin Kamara gets hurt. Like, on a week in and week out basis, you really can't ever start Latavius Murray. Like, even in a 6-team bye week, which I haven't even checked buys if we have one of those this year.
I think there are one or two.
Oh God, NFL, could we stop with this? So do we have a 2-team NFL or NFL bye too?
Yeah, definitely. Maybe it's a TV thing, but I want it to explain to me why we don't just have 4-team bye weeks.
Exactly. That's what it is. It's just I don't get it either. But in any case, even in a 6-team bye, you're still you're going to be, I'm gritting my teeth saying I want to put Latavius Murray even in my lineup because you're hoping for a touchdown. Otherwise, it's just, good God, what did I do here? But the appeal everybody has is, good God, also, could you imagine when Kamara misses time, Latavius Murray is an RB1. But is that going to be true with the quarterback situation we have this year? So I get it. I'm not saying it's the wrong place. I have him a little bit even higher than this, as I just mentioned. But I'd actually just rather take a James Robinson, who I know I could plug in as a flex. I'd rather take, a guy like, I don't love Jamal Williams, but I think Jamal Williams is going to be involved a lot more than people think in that offense. Because
Jamal Williams is a nice call because I'm pretty sure, if I'm remembering this correctly, they're really close to one another in ADP. Yeah, Jamal Williams is by ADP right now. Jamal Williams is the next running back off the board behind Latavius. So they go.
Darrell Henderson, if he's healthy, who I have behind Latavius Murray, I'd rather draft because I could see him having flex value. So don't disagree at all. It just the Latavius Murray is just one of those ones where, do you want the guy on your bench just because you know the upside if something happens to Kamara, or do you want somebody that you could potentially use in a flex spot? That's what it really comes down to.
I'm just going to pivot for a second here. We're going to have to talk about Darrell Henderson and the group of backs who are maybe too good for their starter to be going where he's going. And I love Cam Akers, but maybe Darrell Henderson's a little too good. And I love the face that Brandon's making. Mr. Cam Akers. Brandon, I love Cam Akers. Funston is totally not buying that premise at all. We'll talk about it. I'm going to throw it in our little ideas sheet, and we'll talk about those sorts of backs at some point.
It's actually how you pronounce Brandon's last name. Brandon Akers.
Yeah, right. Funston Akers. Duh. Who can't see that? Let's do one more little showdown here. Siren. Horrible siren noise. Showdown. T.Y. Hilton and the guy we were just talking about, Marvin Jones. Based on what you guys were just saying, I think I know which direction both of you are going, so we can maybe get through this one quickly. But actually, let me ask you this: are you both Marvin Jones over T.Y. Hilton?
Yes.
All right, then let's approach it from this direction. If come December you are wrong, Jake, what will have happened to make T.Y. Hilton the better receiver? And don't say injury to Marvin Jones.
I will say it. I will say Carson Wentz has a bigger bounce back than anybody expected. T.Y. Hilton showed last year towards the end that he wasn't done and replicates that and not what he did over the entire season. Michael Pittman doesn't take a significant step forward, and Paris Campbell isn't healthy. I don't want to throw an injury one in there, but really what it comes down to, I was surprised. Like, I don't dislike Hilton, but when I did my projections, I was surprised how far down Hilton checked in. He's down by 60 around Russell Gage, Nelson Aguilar, Traquan Smith, Devontae Parker. Those are the names he's down there by. But that's because if you told me talent all around, I like Pittman the most at this point of Hilton's career. I think Paris Campbell is another guy that people forgot how excited people were, how good he could be, especially out of the slot. Drew some similarities. People were making some similarities to Jamison Crowder coming out of college, of that type of player. I think Crowder was actually the year after, wasn't he? I don't know. It's similar timeline. It was similar styles. Anyway, point being is if healthy, all these guys, I think that's just the problem is you're going to see cannibalizing each other. But that's how Hilton gets up to Marvin Jones inside the top 35 again, as if you see last year's T.Y. Hilton, Carson Wentz, and then all those other factors. It's a lot to ask.
Yeah, I think Jake said it. I mean, I think Hilton, if he is 100% healthy all season, and Carson Wentz has a true bounce back, and he's back with his old coach, and things are going well, T.Y. Hilton has a more reasonable scenario where he is the number one target in that Colts offense compared to Marvin Jones, who we're arguing could, some people are saying Shenault and Chark will be ahead of him in terms of that. But, so I think there's less muddled, people lining up for the ball in Indianapolis. And I guess that's the path to Hilton winning this.
All right, guys, clue number 3 coming your way for Guess That Player. Don't guess yet. We'll guess right at the end of the show. But clue number 3 for Guess That Player is right here. I play on an offense that ranked 3rd in total touchdowns and 2nd in passing touchdowns last year. Jake, you feeling good about your guess? Is that what that nodding is?
Yeah.
Brandon, you also feeling good? Oh, yeah.
I want Brandon not to get this one day. This is why I don't play trivia against Funston.
We will play off Guess That Player after we talk about these next two more players to talk about with their ADP, the first of which is Phillip Lindsay. 151.7 is the overall ADP, RB50, mid-13th round. Someone needs to talk me out of having Phillip Lindsay on literally every team this season, because I think I'm going to have him on every single team where I possibly can. I think there's a very real path to him leading this team, leading Houston in carries and targets out of the backfield. I mean, all he's got to do is supplant David Johnson to do that. And even if both of them are involved all season, Lindsay is a good running back. We still know that about him. And so I don't know, I know Brandon doesn't want to do it. Jake, you want to try to talk me out of having Phillip Lindsay on every single one of my teams?
Yeah, I will.
I want to. I'm not on Team Lindsay.
Oh, good.
I thought you were.
Funston and I are the outs on Team Lindsay. Let's go. Come on, Funston, go ahead.
Passes the eye test, and that's got so many people over the years just saying, why did he get slided in Denver? Why is Denver doing that? But the fact is, Denver has they have a better position to look at Phillip Lindsay than all of us do the carry. So again, I hate the environment. I think it's crazy to think that we're just going to assume that Houston's going to let Lindsay take over this backfield when he couldn't even like stick in Denver, and they turned the corner there. So I don't know. To me, it's you could get lucky at ADP. It could work out well, but I think there's also a reasonable chance it might not work out at all.
Wow, yeah, we can do the final space reference, clasp of friendship. There you go, Funston. Come on, look. Beller, you know this. I was super high on Lindsay last year, and
I remember
until hurt, all the arguments of why we weren't in on Melvin Gordon at his cost was right. It was being shown as Phillip Lindsay was a thorn in his side. The biggest thing that Brandon just mentioned there, without cheating. Now, hey, I got a trivia question for you guys. Do you remember what David Johnson's yards per carry were last year?
3.9.
4.8.
Funston's super close. 4.7. For as bad as everybody wants to dump on David Johnson, and I know yards per carry I'm the one that says it all the time. Yards per carry is not like, you can't just be like, yards per carry, done, stat. But that's still a little bit telling for the fact that, similar to James Conner, David Johnson's not done. Like, yes, he doesn't look like peak David Johnson. We all remember the play 2 years ago where it looked like he was running in mud. But David Johnson still showed last year he still has something there. And David Johnson was still a top 20 running back in fantasy, surprisingly enough. And I'm not saying David Johnson, you should be excited about him, but where I'm out on him is not the fact that I'm out on Lindsay, Beller. It's the fact that I think what I've seen in drafts so far is that the general public, which we reference a lot, it feels like everybody is in on Lindsay because everybody feels like David Johnson is toast. Mark Ingram is toast, which I definitely agree with that one. But Rex Burkhead's here now too. It's just a Buddy Howell, I think, is on the team. Like it's a committee. And if you're going to tell me as of today, if everybody's healthy, it still starts the pecking order with David Johnson. I don't disagree with you, but if Phillip Lindsay was going just like, I don't think I've seen a draft where he's fallen to RB 50. This ADP, it feels off to me, and I don't have Lindsay at all so far. And I like the guy.
All right, you guys failed. I'm still going to have him on so many teams. One more guy to get to here before we wrap up the show. It's a guy that Jake mentioned earlier this week. He mentioned earlier this show, so I wanted to be sure that we talked about him. Big John Brown, wide receiver 62 by ADP. Jake, you said one of maybe the most underappreciated signings of this offseason. Could be a wide receiver 1 on his own team. So what's the glory you're seeing in John Brown this year?
It's not even so much glory as I want to ask the fantasy world is, how do we go from, John Brown's underrated, John Brown's underrated, John Brown's underrated? And I mean, it doesn't matter who. It's like general public fans of the team that he's playing for, like whatever it is, like John. And then all of a sudden everybody's like, John Brown, whatever. Who cares? And it's like, he's going to a team where if you disagree with me, which a lot of people do, that Henry Ruggs isn't toast, and I think that Henry Ruggs could be the number 1 wide receiver if used properly. If you disagree with me, again, which feels like I'm on an island, well, somebody needs to be the number 1. And I don't think Bryan Edwards is ready for it yet. And I like Bryan Edwards. Who's ready for it? John Brown. John Brown is stepping into what Nelson Aguilar just vacated. And if Nelson Aguilar could do that, and it is not Henry Ruggs, John Brown stepping in as the number 1 alongside Darren Waller. And what does this produce with John Brown? Top 35, 40 at worst. And I think just health is maybe that's it. Maybe it's because he got overshadowed so much by Diggs and Beasley last year. Yeah. But John Brown, a healthy John Brown, could be the number 1 wide receiver for this team and could put up 900 yards and 6 touchdowns in a blink.
Yeah,
as in the season blink, not like 1 week blink.
Look, I think he is a more talented player than Nelson Aguilar, and there's no reason he can't step in and just do Nelson Aguilar things here as well. I mean, I'm on John Brown as well. I think he's vastly underrated.
48, 82, 896, and 8 for Nelson Aguilar last season. At 48 receptions, 82 targets, 896 yards, and 8 touchdowns with the Raiders. And I'm with you guys. I think that they could just obviously there's going to be changes to the offense, but they could just say, all right, John, 82 targets coming your way, exactly the 82 that Nelson Aguilar had last year. Do with it what you will. And I think he could easily match that. And I would bet on him actually getting more targets than Aguilar had last season. Let's wrap this up, guys. Let's guess that player. I'll run through all 3 clues. Once again, clue number 1, wide receiver 16 by points per game last season, 16 spots better than my overall finish. Clue number 2, this is my 5th year in the league, but I am just 25 years old. And clue number 3, I play in an offense that ranked 3rd in total touchdowns, 2nd in passing touchdowns a season ago. Who is that player? Yeah, Chris Godwin is that player. Good job, guys.
I'm like, who is Deontay Godwin?
The best wide receiver in the history of football, damn it.
Yeah, that would be pretty darn good. You take those 2 guys and put them together. Chris Godwin is, hold on, wait for it. 44 ADP, wide receiver 15. I guess that feels fair. Mike Evans is 38.7 ADP, wide receiver 13 ADP. I think, God, would you rather have Godwin? I would maybe rather. I mean, Evans is built on touchdown upside, right? And like, I don't know, does that even out this season? Godwin missed the 4 games last year. It's fair. And you can make an argument for either one of them. I guess that's really the argument you have to decide is, would you rather have Godwin or Evans? And then that guy's probably going right around that wide receiver 12, 13 range. Is that right, Jake?
I feel, again, this is just perception. The drafts have been so far. 10 out of 10 times Godwin goes in front of Evans. And I say that because I have a decent amount of Mike Evans so far because I feel like he's going almost a round later. And one of the things we talked about last year, and this is where I'll say, I admit I was wrong. I thought Antonio Brown's emergence in December was going to hurt Mike Evans more than Chris Godwin. It actually did the opposite. Mike Evans was the one that held steady, especially the touchdowns. But the touchdowns for Mike Evans is never. He's one of the ones that's like, it's not like, oh my God, Mike Evans scored touchdowns, 10 touchdowns. He's going to regress down to 4. No, Mike Evans is the number one touchdown, especially with Tom Brady guy. I love Chris Godwin. Go back to when I talked about a rookie. So like, that's why I was talking about when Deshaun Hamilton was like, oh, we're going to get 3 Penn State wide receivers in a row. And then Deshaun Hamilton did nothing. But Chris Godwin, I love him. But if you're going to tell me fringe wide receiver 1 cost, and I'm going to get Mike Evans a half of a tier to a tier later on wide receivers, I have less concerns about Evans being the one that busts between the two, because if Antonio Brown does what he did in December and he's a factor the entire year, I do think that hurts Godwin more than it hurts Evans.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder if, Godwin missing 6 games in the last 2 years, 4 last year, is if you hadn't seen that, I think you're talking about a guy who's pushing that top 12 in that wide receiver 1 class. But Mike Evans is almost Jarvis Landry-like, and he never misses games. I mean, he's missed a few in his career, but he's pretty reliable for 15, 16 games and getting to double-digit touchdowns. So I agree. A little bit later, a half round later, or more, you're going to go Mike Evans. But Chris Godwin plays 16 games. He's got as much upside as anybody.
Yeah, absolutely. To refresh everyone's mind on what Jake's referencing when he says what Antonio Brown did, he played 8 games with the Buccaneers last season, 45 catches, 483 yards, and 4 touchdowns. Like, he was an effective dude, and he did
most
a lot
of that.
Was
in December.
Yeah, in December, exactly. But then he had the touchdown in the Super Bowl. He had 2 touchdowns. Right, he had another touchdown somewhere along Tampa's run in the postseason. So, I mean, he is going to have a big share in that offense, and so. Another one that where we started the show, we bring it full circle. A fun one to invest in, but maybe not quite as easy as you're going to want it to be. This show, I mean, super easy to invest in. You can get us right here on YouTube. You can get us on Spotify, on Apple, on the Athletic app, and you can still get in for $3.99 a month, theathletic.com/fantasyfootballpod. And once you're in, you are in. Check out all the great stuff that we've got in the draft kit. And the 3 of us will be coming to you twice a week through July. In August, we kick it up to 3 times a week. So be here with us every single time we take to the airwaves. That's Brandon Funston. That guy right there is Jake Seeley, and I'm Michael Beller. Have a great weekend. We're back with you on Monday. Back with you on Monday. Have a great weekend, everyone.